Before we get into this video, I just want to give a big thank you to Grimtail Brothers, and if you are looking for more horror content, make sure you subscribe. You'll be able to hear them narrating a couple stories in here. Just a couple of brothers in the horror genre trying to do their thing. And without any further ado, let's begin. I've met a serial killer. As a matter of fact, he became friends with my former husband. They were co-workers at a manufacturing plant in a small Texas town. This guy killed 7 women back in the 1980s, 6 of whom were not connected to him until 1999. Farion Wardrip was previously incarcerated for one of those killings back in 1986. He was released on parole in 1997. His case was in Wichita County, but he was granted permission to move to Olney, Texas, which is in Young County. He was fitted with an electronic monitoring device and was relocated. He began a whole new life. He met a woman, got married. He became a Sunday school teacher, and of course he got hired at our local screen and door plant where he met and befriended my husband in mid-1998. Farion was his ride to and from work. They became pretty close and started a friendship. My children and I were formally introduced to him at a local high school football game that fall. I remember him being very cordial and polite and very tall, way above 6 feet. So when the news broke 6 months later of his arrest, we were all stunned. My husband cried hard. He was very upset. How that took place was an assistant investigator started going through old case files from Wichita County and nearby Archer County from the late 1980s. 5 murders came up. They were young women who were strangled and maybe stabbed. One victim was a nurse at a local hospital. The dots started becoming connected when the name Farion Wardrip kept appearing as a possible suspect. So a warrant was obtained and the investigator drove to Olney and spent 5 days on a stakeout. There was a laundromat directly across the street from a door and screen company. The entire week he kept watch to see if Farion would be spotted. On Friday, he finally was. The investigator saw Farion get into his wife's vehicle during a routine break. He was snacking on cheese crackers and drinking something out of a white styrofoam cup. As he was getting out of his wife's car, the investigator took off across the street. He took a dip of snuff, and when he was next to Farion, he asked where he could get a spit cup from. He was pointed to the trash can, and Farion went back inside and his wife drove away. He had to move quickly, so he looked in the barrel and he found a cup with an orange residue around the rim. He grabbed it and placed it inside a Ziploc bag. Back across the street he went. He grabbed his extremely clean laundry and drove back to his office in Wichita Falls. From there, the cup was sent to a forensic lab in Dallas for analysis. It came back as a match linking him to those 5 victims through DNA. As Farion was wearing that ankle monitor, his parole officer contacted him under the guise of it being removed early and was told to appear at the county courthouse the following morning. He did and was placed under arrest for 5 murders. Well, he started spilling his guts, claiming his conscience was getting the best of him, plus being religious and all, he decided to repent. Okay, but he added one more victim as there was an unsolved murder out of Fort Worth. His arrest made news all over the place and was splashed on the next day's Sunday paper. My husband got the phone call. At first he didn't believe it. Then he bought the newspaper. He was devastated. The case has been profiled on forensic files and some books have been written on it. I bought one of them. Currently, Farion is on death row in Huntsville, Texas. However, he is trying to appeal the sentence. The usual unfair representation and coercion. Whatever. To this day, knowing that I met, looked at, and shook hands with a violent killer totally creeps me out.
The whole thing unfolded today. Cops were involved. I almost had a panic attack. It was a whole mess. So, I'm on a trip backpacking around Europe with my brother, currently in Paris. We're staying at this hostel, and we're in a 10-bunk bedroom. there was this one guy in the room who was immediately super weird. Almost right away, like as soon as we got settled, he starts talking to us about flying to Libya. He's all,
"Us, Libya, fly tomorrow."
and me and my brother are just like, "Nah, dude." He keeps saying it. We keep saying no, and he's getting progressively more assertive about it. As me and my brother are going around doing sightseeing and stuff, I keep seeing this dude around. When we're at the hostel, he kept following us to the dining hall, out onto the terrace, and I'm getting more creeped out. My brother, ever the non-assertive soul he is, just laughs it off like the dude is joking. This goes on for 2 days. Well, this morning, we were going out to breakfast and I forgot my phone back in the room. So I told my brother to just go ahead and I ran back to get it. I go in the room and the dude is sitting there. There's no one else in the room and I honestly contemplated just leaving it. But I didn't trust it alone in the room. So I planned to just grab it quickly. That morning, he was still on about Libya and was essentially bending over our beds going on about it, despite me repeatedly telling him to stop talking to us. I go in and grab my phone when he suddenly just yells,
"Libya, now, we go now."
I'm very scared, since at this point we're the only ones in the room, and I just say, "Fuck off, dude!" And I go to leave when he blocks the door and grabs my shoulder, still going on about going to the airport and flying to Libya. I shove past him and run away to where my brother and I were going to breakfast. I decided that we were going to switch rooms because this dude was officially creep level 100. We make it back to the hostel, and before we talk to the front desk, we went outside for a smoke, and he shows up. I almost yell at him to leave us alone, and he flat out says no. I go to the front desk and explain that this dude has been harassing us and we wanted to change rooms. I mentioned what went down in the room, and before I knew it, the cops were called and I was giving a statement. As they were sorting it out, there were a couple of things that jumped out at me. 1. This guy didn't pay in advance. Normally, when you're staying in a hostel, you pay the full amount up front, or if you're staying for a while, you pay weekly. He was paying by the day. 2. He had several pieces of ID in his wallet, none of which matched his description. Apparently, Perez has been having a problem with human trafficking. This guy was escorted out of the hostel by police. He was banned from staying there again, ever. Me and my brother switched rooms and we were given vouchers for free dinners for the rest of our stay here. And now, I'm terrified to go out by myself. I swear, if me and that guy had been alone in a more secluded place that didn't have cameras everywhere, I could have been shipped off to Libya. So, creepy guy from the Paris hostel, let's not meet.
Jay Johnson, who was rather known due to his slayings of 2 men and wounding of another in separate attacks shortly after graduating from school, was a student at the college where I was teaching in the late 80s to early 90s. It was his goal to become a serial killer of gay men. What complicates this story is that he was gay and apparently had been diagnosed with HIV. I remember him very well as one of the more intelligent and verbal students of his era. When Jack Kemp held a speech on campus, for instance, Jay was the one who asked the most intelligent question. I only spoke to him in passing, but he was a regular on the hallway of my office due to the fact that his advisor was in the neighboring office. Several years later, he was featured in a movie called License to Kill, 1997. This is the blurb that appears about him and his crimes. Jay Johnson, murderer of former state senator John Chenoweth and Joe Larson at gay hangouts in Minneapolis. Unlike the other murderers in the film, he recognized that he was in fact gay both before and after his committed murders. He is currently serving 2 concurrent life terms at the St. Cloud Correctional Facility as an openly gay man. I still regard this as a very tragic case that is almost mind-boggling in its complexity. If you watch the film, you will immediately recognize that he is a very intelligent but very confused individual who was as much a victim as a victimizer. My former landlord was Janine Steno. She's probably Belgium's only female serial killer. She worked in several care homes for the elderly, and everywhere she worked there were suspicious deaths and wills that were changed in her favor at the last moment. She had inherited 11 houses and a lot of money like that. Every time there were suspicions, usually the family of the deceased were certain about the criminal nature of what had happened. But there was never any conclusive evidence, and so she had no criminal record and was able to find work in another care home. Only when she was 72, she was finally found guilty of killing her former boyfriend and received 25 years in jail, where she still stays now. Before the trial, she was forced to undergo psychiatric testing, and she was diagnosed with narcissistic personality disorder with psychopathic traits. I didn't really talk to her all that much, but usually I can easily spot a narcissist as I grew up with one, my father. In her case, I was surprised. I hadn't seen it at all. All I knew was that she was cold, suspicious, greedy, and dishonest. Her son was the same. Her brother, a university professor that I had met as well, had a reputation for being insensitive and cold, but his academic work was never doubted. All in all, I was surprised when I read the newspaper that she had been found guilty. She had always said that her brother knew many magistrates personally and had tried to trick her. It also turned out that she had prior convictions for running a brothel, and she had been fired from care homes for having sex with residents, probably in hopes they would get a heart attack and die.
I work at a large crafting store in California and have been there for a year and 8 months now. A little background before I explain what's been going on is needed. So last year, we hired a guy, named Hayden. Hayden was a little quiet on the first day, but quickly became more talkative, and over the next couple weeks started to never stop talking. He would constantly say weird shit. For instance, one day he was put in charge of building furniture. Our store carries stuff like furniture and home decor as well. He was apparently having difficulty assembling the table he was working on, and he said something about cutting his wrist if he can't figure out how to put it together. Another time, we were both working in the stock room, and he kept talking about how much he looked like the Parkland shooter, Nicholas Cruz. I'll admit, he did in fact look like that kid, which was creepy. I remember one day, I had gotten off work and was waiting for my ride to pick me up, when out of nowhere, Hayden walked up behind me. He just stood there, with an awkward smile on his face, and I politely asked him,
"What's up?"
He said something to the effect of,
"Oh, nothing much. Just enjoying my lunch break. I'm thinking about going inside Taco Bell
right across the parking lot from our work,
and shanking someone."
He pretty much laughed and said he was joking around after saying that. When my wife picked me up, we saw him walking toward the Taco Bell. He just flashed us this creepy-ass ear-to-ear smile. So the last straw for me was when he and I were assigned to work our spring freight and get it loaded up onto the large U-boat. Our shift started at 7 a.m. and was over at noon. It was 11, and we still hadn't finished our task because Hayden just wouldn't stop goofing around. He would also work very, very slowly on purpose and would only take one item to the U-boat at once. Our boss came to where we were working and was upset that we weren't done yet. He told us we would both get written up if the job wasn't finished before we were off. I was pissed off at this point, and Hayden knew it. He seemed to feel bad for pretty much getting me in trouble and apologized. He then said something that really concerned me. He said in the most serious tone I've ever heard him speak and since meeting him,
"If I get fired, I'll shoot this place up."
He then said he knew where all the emergency exits were, and he would first shoot all the cashiers and then move to the other employees in the store. I mean, I'll admit that I didn't immediately report what he said, but it did have me on edge, and I kept thinking about what if. So after some convincing from my wife, I finally did the right thing and informed my manager. They took a written report from me and contacted the police. After 2 more days working with Hayden, he was fired and arrested for his threats. The week after he got arrested, my boss held a meeting with the entire staff and told everyone what happened. After everybody left the meeting, he pulled me aside and revealed to me what the police and Hayden had talked about during the interrogation. I don't completely remember what was said, but Hayden apparently admitted that he said what he said and kept asking if I had been the one who reported him. Anyway, fast forward to a few weeks ago. I was working at the same store, still am, and I was heading to the break room for my final break when I heard a voice from one of the aisles to the left. A man was standing next to the paint case and asked if I could help him with some paint. While I was opening the case, he addressed me by my name, which I immediately thought was weird because I wasn't wearing my name tag on this particular day. Out of curiosity, I asked him how he knew my name, and he said it was just a lucky guess, to which I thought was BS, mainly because his tone of voice seemed sarcastic. The entire time I was getting his paint, he was staring at me with a smirk on his face. He then began to ask me questions about my name, which is the same name of a popular TV show character. He asked me what year I was born in, why my parents decided to give me that name, etc. At this point, I started to walk away, and as I had other things to do, and the whole time I was walking away, he was still trying to talk to me. I heard him yelling my name from 3 aisles down. I went and I stood at the warehouse until I thought he was gone. Later that same day, one of my coworkers asked me if I knew the guy who was buying the paint, and I told her I didn't. She told me that he had approached her and asked her all kinds of questions about me, like if I'm a good worker and if she likes me as a coworker. This is an ongoing issue too, as he comes into the store 2 other times, one being yesterday during my day off, and apparently asked where I was. I don't know for sure, but I suspect that this guy might be cousins with Hayden, as they sort of look alike and have similar mannerisms. Both look similar to the Parkland shooter and have that same creepy vibe. This might not be the scariest thing on here, but it's still very freaky.
He came down from Pennsylvania one day and called my place of business. We had a lengthy chat about how he was about to murder someone who had hidden things in a contract for a car sale. He described in detail how he planned to sneak past the guard since he used to work at the place where this guy was. He knew the guard from the back entrance would routinely take a smoke break at around 4 p.m. for about 5 minutes. He said that was plenty of time for him to use the key he had cloned from when he was a guard there and break in. He would then sneak into this car salesman's office and wait until he was alone, and then he would stab him to death and keep stabbing until he could tell there was no heartbeat. I had to talk him down, and he called me because he wanted to sue the guy. I asked him to come in because maybe we could talk through the legal issues of the contract in person. He walks in. Horn-rimmed glasses, huge forehead, got no chin game. This guy's probably 45 years old. White, 5'7" to 5'9", 225 through 250 pounds. He talks through how this guy ended up charging him too much every month for useless checkups. The rental agreement is unfair, and he says he was misled as to the contents of the agreement. The meeting goes smoothly, and I say that maybe we can take his case. I ask if he's joking, and he says he's not, and he cites 2 separate incidents in which he says he killed people. I look them up, and there's real cases in which a guy matching his description killed people in those ways during the dates he stated in Pennsylvania. The MO, victimology, and geography are consistent throughout. In later encounters, he said he served in Vietnam and would regularly kill civilians for fun. Many of these were stabbings, some were shootings, and in some cases he would trap a family in their house and set them on fire. But he says he was kicked out of the military for mental health issues. I noted that one time when he came to a public place with his wife, she would never let him near children. He would say, "Come on, honey, I'm just trying to have some fun." She would say, "We don't want that happening again. Remember what happened last time?" It is here I should note one of the cases he described was a rape and murder by knife of a 10 to 13-year-old girl. He had a totally normal job. I think he sold cigarettes and things at a gas station. Besides that, he hunted and stuffed every animal that he killed. He had a room full of dead animals, and it was lit with red candles and ropes lined the wall. He never let anyone in there. He said, "Don't go in there. It'll be your head on the wall next." The way I'm talking about it makes it sound like I knew this guy for a long time, but I know everyone because I live in a small town. I only knew this guy for about 2 weeks before he skipped town and headed to Montana. Since he's been institutionalized and found innocent, I shall not state his name in connection to these cases. I've had a couple brushes with serial killers, I think. The first person really depends on your defining of what a serial killer is, so I'll define him as one, but no one will know of him. I was drafted into the Army in 1972. I don't recall the details or exact time, but I believe that I was on a bus and started talking to the man next to me. When he found out I'd just gotten out of the Army, he started talking about his time in it. He said he'd been in Vietnam and his job was to instill terror into the enemies. He told me stories of slipping into enemy camps, into their sleeping quarters and slitting the throat of one of their soldiers, then slipping out. He didn't say how often he did this or about any other acts that he committed. He seemed sane, and I believe what he said at the time, as I'd seen other unbelievable things while in the military. The second person I had an encounter with was, I believe, Jeffrey Dahmer. I can't be 100% sure, but in the 80s I worked a few blocks from where Dahmer lived. I sometimes work late, and one night I went to an area laundromat. I was the only one in there when a young man came in with a small armload of clothes and put them into the washing machine next to mine. Then he left. The thing that stood out to me was he had what appeared to be a golf ball in his mouth, which he kept moving around. My thought was that he was trying to keep from being recognized. I thought about calling the police. Later, he returned to collect his clothes. I was leaning on the washing machine his clothes were in. He told me angrily to get off his washer. The whole incident was so weird and unbelievable that I did call the police from the payphone in the laundromat as soon as he left. The police came by and looked around, but he was apparently long gone, and they aren't going to go to great lengths on a hunch. It was a few months later that the story broke about Dahmer. I couldn't tell for certain that it was the same man, but the faces and the ages looked awfully close. If you enjoyed this video and enjoy what I do, make sure to hit the like, subscribe, and all that good stuff. And if you'd like to get yourself some cool perks, check out my Patreon page or debate on becoming a channel member. You can do that by clicking the join button down by the subscribe button. Once again, I want to give a huge shout out to Grimtail Brothers. And if you're looking for more horror stories, make sure you go check them out. You can find a link in the description and in the comments. Appreciate y'all helping me out, thank you. Sorry it took so long. I appreciate you all checking out this video, and I will catch you in the next one. And just remember, it's always scarier if it's true. Bad bye.